I'm delighted to introduce John Hicks to you today. He is a dyslexia blogger, but that's just a small part of what he does. He is an advocate for assistive technology. He works with clients who perhaps have questions about neurodiversity. So that might be parents, it might be teachers, it might be within the workplace. Where there is neurodiversity, John is going to be able to provide really high quality advice and support. And so the reason people talk to John is because he's a lovely guy and he instills a kind of confidence in you that you feel that you can disclose and chat and share information. And that's really important when you've got issues that you really want to take apart and discuss. So that's John, and he's a parenting coach. So I'm assuming you're a parent as well, John, are you?
I'm a parent. I have 2 daughters, and both of whom are neurodiverse as well. So a lot of what I do comes from the heart.
Yeah, of course. It makes a huge difference, doesn't it, when you've got that first-hand experience. I've got a son, and who is a teenager at the moment, and it really shaped my view on things quite differently, actually. I remember when I was a student teacher, actually, and didn't have any children, and I probably wasn't a very good teacher for the first sort of 6 years or so, because I just didn't have that empathy or understanding developed. So you do speak from the heart and feel so much more when you are managing things from first-hand experience and understanding what it's like to guide a young person through and into the world. And you have to take them such a long way, don't you, and really hold things for them. So I appreciate that people joining our webinar today, which is a Succeed with Dyslexia webinar, may be joining us perhaps during the event, or maybe joining us after the event if we put this out as a podcast. And I'm hoping that you'll find the information really helpful and useful. So I'm Julia Clouter. I'm a SENCo. I was a teacher for about 25 years. I was a designated safeguarding lead, and as such I did lots of work with parents and families and supporting in a way where people let me into their world to talk about things that were really difficult, and that was something that I felt very privileged to have experienced in my time working in schools, because when people invest trust in you to talk about things that are difficult, you take that responsibility very seriously, and it is an absolute privilege to be able to have done that. So I now work for Scanning Pens too, and also write and produce resources and continue the work of trying to support people who have literacy and learning difficulties within my role at Scanning Pens. But this webinar here is really specifically about helping with dyslexia, young people who are neurodiverse, and trying to pull our community together, really, because we're at a time that is certainly very tricky, a time where people are really valuing additional information, and I think quite rightly so. It's tricky times, and we're all appreciating the support that's there that we can get. So without further ado, the title of this webinar is, roll back across my screen, why is it important for children with dyslexia to have good self-esteem, and what strategies can we use to ensure that we support them with confidence? That's a biggie, the feeling confident ourselves bit. Parents of dyslexic children are likely to be aware and concerned that their children are likely to perhaps have that self-esteem gap going on. So John Hicks is going to be talking to us, and we're going to be sharing questions and unpicking this today. So John, you're a dyslexia blogger. What have you been doing recently? What's happening in your world?
Oh, well, yeah, a bit bizarre, really. I mean, I work from home anyway, so the current kind of lockdown thing has been kind of interesting, because I do a lot of stuff from home. But yeah, a lot of my work is writing about studying with dyslexia, and my aim, if you like, the thing that drives me is is that I want every dyslexic child to believe that their unique way of thinking could change the world. So often kids with any kind of difference, it doesn't necessarily have to be dyslexia, I choose to work in that space, but anything that sets us apart from others can sometimes impact on how we feel about ourselves. And sometimes we lose sight of, say, our strengths and what we bring to the table, and we focus on what we're struggling with. So everything I do is about supporting. It aims at helping children to believe in themselves, but I do that by supporting the supporters of those children, whether that's parents or teachers. And my specific interest is very much the emotional well-being side of having dyslexia or any kind of difference, really. We all experience self-defeating beliefs, right? If we're going to do a big talk in front of a few hundred people, we're going to be, doesn't matter how experienced you are, you're going to start thinking, oh, what if this goes wrong? Or what if the webinar doesn't work? You start kind of coming up with these thoughts. And this is something that I think the volume goes up too high when we're in the dyslexia space. If we find that we're struggling to do certain things, we start to really doubt ourselves. And so if I can provide information and provide support to those supporters, then they can go off and do their thing. Whether it's parents or whether it's teachers and so forth. So that's kind of what I've been doing over the past sort of 3 months of the lockdown period. Is I've been coaching parents, I've been writing articles, done 1 or 2 webinars as well, just to sort of help, really. It's stressful times. It's ironic because I think kids with dyslexia probably learn better at home. They've got the attention of the parents. They can take the time over the content. There's no kind of real as much pressure perhaps for the child in the home. A lot of pressure for the parents, and so this is something that I've been working on, is supporting parents and helping them to kind of think about what they're feeling, what they're struggling with. Often if you've got a neurodiverse child, dyslexia or whatever the cognitive difference is, and there's a good chance the parent is like that as well, or got something similar. I've got a daughter who's dyslexic, I've got a daughter who's got ADHD, I've got a little bit of dyslexia, I've got more of a profile associated with ADHD. So the emotional buttons get pressed left, right and centre, don't they? So it's a bit of a weird time. A lot of pressure on parents, maybe less on the kids, but it's still really difficult. We've had 2 lots of summer holidays, haven't we, for the kids, which is a bit weird, and we're facing another 7 weeks. And we're only just starting to be let out, unless you're in Leicester. So that's going to aggravate that. So so there's challenges everywhere. So so I'm just sort of trying to support my group. I have a group on Facebook called Parenting Dyslexia, and there's 1,800 parents on there. And I sort of provide articles, and they get in touch. They're all entitled to time with me for free initially to sort of unpick what's going on for them. And there's been about 10 parents that I've been working with sort of personally to sort of help them as they grapple with their own self-esteem, actually, in many cases. How can I be a teacher when the teacher spends a whole day, they've got the training? How can I teach my child who's struggling with teaching and struggling with learning anyway? Some interesting things taking place.
So I think some homes are struggling so hard. If you've got more than one neurodiverse child, or you've got 2 children who don't like each other particularly, which does happen, you've got a pressure cooker. And I think this has been happening for a lot of people, that just kind of the nuts and bolts of how do you manage this? How do you keep everybody calm? How do you keep everybody safe? Particularly if you've got nowhere to move out to, if you're really seriously closed in and not been able to get too much exercise or been able to get out into a garden. And
Absolutely.
These are the families that I've been on my mind, thinking about the sorts of children that I've supported, and about the level of energy, just for children with both dyslexia, who tend to be fiddlers, and those with ADHD who really do need to get out and move because they just got to shake it out. And so I think it's been really tough times for a lot of families. And then there's the additional pressure of how do we do this business of learning support and not feeling that you're perhaps qualified to teach your children to manage whatever has been provided by school at that point in time. And so I think that's been a huge confidence hurdle for some parents. And then for dyslexic learners sitting at home, they might be looking at resources, perhaps printed materials, books, perhaps looking into screens and not being able to manage that work that's been sent home. And maybe parents might not be able to support with that because they struggle with those materials as well. And I think that's the point where self-esteem really plummets. And I want to sort of unpick with you, at what point, how do you know that self-esteem is starting to erode in your child? You know, what are we seeing basically, the poor self-esteem signs?
Well, I think the first thing to do is just acknowledge that self-esteem is something that I think we use that phrase a lot, right? We use it a lot to describe people, and certainly in some of the webinars I've done recently, it's been good to just stop and define it, and just so that we all know what we're talking about, because I think it's quite a subjective. It can be an ambiguous term. It will mean self-esteem for one person will mean something different to someone else. I use a really, really simple definition, which I've taken straight off the NHS website, which is it's simple. It just says self-esteem is the opinion that we have of ourselves. So we're talking about the narrative that we might have about our strengths and weaknesses, and essentially, when self-esteem is poor, we are not believing in the fact that we can deal with whatever life throws up at us. So, for example, let's use a different example to the dyslexia point, but let's say you're facing walking up a mountain, for example, and you've never had any training on mountain trekking or the equipment and so forth. Someone with poor self-esteem might be extremely anxious about their abilities to get up that mountain, whether they're right or wrong to, someone with good self-esteem might relish the challenge. And what we're talking about is a perspective on the challenges that life throws up.
So you use this word narrative. So unpick that a little bit more. What do you mean by this narrative? What's happening with that?
Yeah. Okay. So, well, let me give you an example. So, one of the things that makes the work that I do so personal for me is that actually through my daughter's experience of dyslexia, there was a lot that reflected in myself. I resonated really strongly with her experience. So, for example, when we started to notice some challenges with her ability to read, we were in secondary education. She was 12 years old, and there have been a few things that had indicated that there was a problem, and they were kind of fundamental issues. And I remember really clearly sitting with the year manager and my daughter, and my daughter, she's 12 and she's worried. She was in tears, worried about whether or not she'd pass the GCSEs. Right? She didn't believe, given what she was working with at the moment, that she was going to pass her GCSE. She didn't think she was capable. She would say that she wasn't academic, and she would say that she really struggled. She'd compare herself with her sister. Her friends would be, doing very well in class, and she could articulate her learning with her voice. She could talk about what she's learning. She could have great debates. Her verbal reasoning was very, very strong. Getting it down on paper was a different matter. And keeping up with getting it down on paper, because a lot of it was handwritten, kind of pushed to sort of handwrite rather than say use a laptop and type. And she didn't believe that she'd get there. So at that stage, that lack of belief, then it was almost like a pair of spectacles, right? She'd somehow taken off the rose tinted ones and she'd put on the very dark ones and made everything look really grey and a bit kind of heavy and a bit daunting and a bit overwhelming. Her perspective was such, well, her narrative was such that she was not believing that she was going to get there.
That's really interesting, the way that you've described that, and really helpful. In my experience talking to students, when I've been thinking about this narrative, I've often talked to students about and used the term internal dialogue.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah.
And this it sounds like this is the same sort of thing. And this business of internal dialogue is the business of looking in the mirror, and instead of having "hello beautiful" coming back at you, it's the, you know, hello ugly, hello useless, hello foolish, whatever that then comes back at you. You wear that, don't you?
Absolutely. And one thing I want to throw in, I think you've got a slide for this as well, Julia. If you,
let me see if I can get it.
I'm a big fan of what's something called a piece of psychology called Maslow's hierarchy of need. As a, you know, I'm a trained therapeutic counselor, so this is something I've lived and breathed for a little while. So what you can see here is Abraham Maslow was a psychologist in the 40s, and he came up with this term self-actualization at the top of the triangle. Whilst I understand what that means, for me, how I relate to that, I see that actually as the ability to unlock potential. And basically what he said was, if there's a bunch of needs that you need to be able to fulfill before you can unlock your potential, before you can shine, whatever language you want to put, right? So if you imagine that, if your internal dialogue or your narrative or your belief in yourself is telling you that you can't do things, that, you know, if I go into school and I'm asked to read out in front of the class, then I'm going to make myself look like an idiot in front of my friends. If you're having thoughts along those lines, then you're going to be down the bottom of that triangle where it says like safety needs, right? You're going to feel unsafe because you're worried about being seen to be somehow deficient in public. You might be worried about people taking the mickey. You might be worried about what the teacher might think, and so forth. So this is something that I think I push very hard with the work that I do about self-esteem, because we won't have good self-esteem if we won't unlock our potential if we're not fulfilling these needs. If I know, for example, if I'm really tired and if I'm really hungry, my ability to learn anything is zero. I mean, even at my best, when I'm trying to read stuff, I have to keep myself on track because my attention's shocking. Interestingly, though, I'm comfortable with that now rather than judging it, because now I'm comfortable with it. I don't feel like it's such a bad thing. And then that somehow I relax and then I start to learn more. I'm more comfortable in my own skin. I can handle whatever's coming my way. Now, for a 12-year-old girl or any other teenager who's struggling to be in school, and they know they struggle with reading, or they struggle with attention, or they struggle with communication, or whatever the struggles are, whatever the needs are, if they are seeing that, if the inner critic is really judging them, and they're telling themselves that they're just going to have another day of being compared to others and they're just going to fail at it all. Now, I'm deliberately being extreme here because not every child with dyslexia feels like this. Some take a perspective of, well, okay, it's fine. Was it Jamie Oliver said in a recent video I saw that he said that he knew he was terrible at school academically, but he saw it as a great social club with his friends, and so he loved school. That wasn't a challenge for him, and he's doing really well, obviously, as a chef and as an entrepreneur. It is about the view we take, and if our self-esteem is low, if our perspective on ourselves is such that we're judging ourselves more rather than maybe being curious about what we could do, what the opportunities are in things, then we're going to be right down there in that orange safety area. And we're going to struggle to start to get involved with things. We're going to struggle to belong to groups of people. Maybe we withdraw more for fear of being caught out. And then we kind of hold ourselves back. This isn't unique to kids. I do a lot of workplace coaching with adults with dyslexia and ADHD and various other sort of cognitive challenges. And, there's no difference there in terms of the thoughts, actually. And then you start to get them to view it in a different way, and they start to see the opportunity. They start to see the hope. They start to build some kind of head of steam that enables them to put strategies in place that can unlock that potential.
And it's the potential. We've all got so much potential, and
Absolutely.
yeah, and it's how we tap into that, and it's the business of presumably having that self-esteem at a point where we can actually actualize, do those things that we want to do, that we hope we might be able to achieve. If you don't have that impetus, you're not going to achieve those things that maybe once upon a time you did think you could do. So I've met lots of young people who've kind of got a bit ground down along the way because they've had a lot of negative messages continually from different places. I have to
Yeah.
say, within education, it's often from teachers who haven't quite seen the bigger picture for this particular student and can't necessarily understand that every time they've gone into a classroom, they've gone in and they've had work handed back that's, in a way that's not respectful, because it's, well, there we are, didn't expect much more than that from you. And I think teachers sometimes are flippant. I think they do a good job, but sometimes they're flippant, and without realizing it, if you've had a flippant comment that's not very positive 4 or 5 times within that day, or you're looking at a piece of work with lots of spelling corrections, redo this, redo this, redo this, or you've been asked to read 4 or 5 times into, I think you're probably going to kick off by the end of the day and then not want to attend. That would be the a possible outcome of that kind of build up, where you've not appreciated that student's or that learner's journey, and it compounds that. And yeah, your self-esteem's going to shrink, isn't it, if you've had that continual experience through the day, and then maybe go home and kick off if you've managed to keep it bottled up all day at school, because a lot of students they do really well. They
Mm.
kind of hold it together, and then yeah, explosion when they get home, because at some point it's going to vent, isn't it, and turn back in on itself. So questions that I would like to know really is, we can see, so good self-esteem is really important. Is it to stop the blowing? Is it to help with the education? Why have we got to have this good self-esteem?
Yeah, I think to start with, to have a good sense of self-esteem, to have that belief in ourselves, I think it helps us to have hope. It helps us to believe that things are going to grow. We're going to grow. We're going to experience good opportunities. There's maybe fun in learning, or there's maybe fun in getting involved in different activities and so forth. And the more we experience, the more we learn. But trouble is, when we have poor self-esteem, maybe we avoid situations that are likely to cause us harm. And not necessarily physical harm, but harm, like I said, about reading out in public and then people seeing you're struggling. That is something that is really fundamental to a lot of kids with dyslexia. And I think you almost want to have a situation where you can go, okay, I'm going to do whatever comes my way, and I'm going to give it my best shot, and I'm going to enjoy it regardless of what happens. Now it's a tall order if you're really struggling with your self-esteem. But I know, for example, there's when I coach my clients, what the analogy I use is that these thoughts that we have, that narrative that tells us about self-esteem, don't do this because this is not going to work, or you're going to break this, or whatever. Ultimately, that comes from a place of our brains trying to protect us. Right, it's a level of anxiety. It's the thoughts that come with the poor self-esteem. We'll have a thought. We'll have a belief in ourselves, whether it's a good belief or a bad belief. Then we'll have thoughts that come with that, and then with those thoughts will come feelings. Right. So if we believe that we're naturally unlucky, for example, and that spend most of my life being unlucky, bad things always happen to me, then we'll have those inner thoughts that will dictate how we approach things. And with those thoughts comes real physical feelings in the body. I use the analogy of, if I was, what time is it? We're towards the end of the afternoon, maybe we're starting to feel a bit hungry. If I asked you to imagine a slice of Black Forest Gatto, for example, and a nice cup of tea, right? I can see on your face, Julie, that you're having some thoughts about that, and that you're starting to go, and there's the behavior, right? So, you know, in the case of my daughter, for example, she was once asked to read out a Bible passage in church. She gets on with the vicar. They're really good friends. There was no issue with her helping the vicar. She wanted to, but she had a huge emotional breakdown at that point. What she heard was, will you please stand up on that pulpit, read out from this book that has font size -5, and make yourself look like an idiot in front of 70 or 80 adults? Right? So that was really scary for her. So being able to turn that around and view things in a different way and be able to go, okay, yes, I might struggle with this, but I'll give it my best shot. And yeah, if there's any challenges, I can deal with that. Trouble is, our brain's trying to keep us safe. So and with those thoughts and feelings comes anxiety, and the anxiety is the thing that kind of keeps us in the box. You know, it's the same exact anxiety as, say, if I got you to walk alongside the White Cliffs of Dover, for example. If you were walking a meter in from that edge, you would be aware of the fact there's a big drop, and your brain might say to you, Julia, just be careful, you've got that drop over there. If you get too close, you're going to fall, but you know you're safe because you're a meter in, so you're going to be fine, right? Someone else might go, well, what happens if I do fall? Oh, that's really scary. I've got a bit of vertigo. I'm scared already. I'm nowhere near the edge. If I fall over there, then I could fall over, break my neck. That could be a nightmare. Or what happened to my family? You can extrapolate all of this, right? And this is what the brain does. Sometimes it kind of it turns up the volume on the anxiety, and sometimes we can appropriately have that anxiety about things. You know, and sometimes we can have inappropriate anxiety where if you can think of like a nominal level of anxiety, if there is a spike, something scary happening, you know, face to face with a tiger thing, yeah, we'll do the fight or flight and leg it. Or if we're too high, if we've already got a short fuse with our anxiety and something bad happens, then the wheels completely fall off. So if we can help with the narrative, bring the sense of self-esteem to a point where we can say, okay, well, whatever happens, even if it's bad, I can deal with it. I'll tackle it head on. It's fine. I'll get the help that I need to deal with it, and we'll just see what happens. That's a much more empowering place to be than someone who thinks they haven't got options. And this is what I want for kids, is I want kids to be able to say, sir, I'm at the back of the class. Can you help me with this? I can't hear you properly. Or can you say that again? And you know, ideally, if someone's asking for you to help, you know, the teacher's going to say, yes, of course. Why don't you come down here and we will help you, or whatever. You know, this is the dialogue I want. I want our parents and our teachers to work together to support our kids in school. But equally, I want our kids to value themselves so much that they think, I don't care what other people think. I want to ask for help, because that will help me get me to where I need to be.
And a key question that I think is so important is, yes, but can you do it for me in a different way? Can you explain it another way as well? Because I need another way as well, please. Or just finding the words to politely say, yeah, okay, just shift it for me so that I can find another way around this.
Yeah.
And if a student has actually got the ability to put that into their own words, where they can just say, okay, I recognise, because teachers need to know, you know, they explain that really well. It's just, can you do it differently? Because you're a teacher and I know you can do that sort of stuff. And I just need to hear it in a different way. And how do we empower young people to do that? Because very often they don't want to admit that they haven't understood it the first way round that a teacher has explained it. I remember being in maths and saying, I'm sorry, I don't understand this. And the teacher then repeated it, only louder, because that was how you get around someone who doesn't understand something. You just turn the volume up, you know. So that was my experience in school. And we've got to get past that and actually advocate for ourselves to say, I need it slightly different, please.
Yeah. But it isn't just teachers that do that. I mean, us as parents do that with our kids, right? We're in a rush. We've got to go somewhere, and our kids saying, "Could you just talk through that?" No, we ain't got time. Come on, let's get going, right? Everyone does it. All adults do this, and I think there is a sense that if we want to help our kids to learn better, to understand better, then we need to be less in front of them or on top of them, and we need to be alongside them. We need to there's a lovely phrase. There's a guy called Hugh Roberts, who's a teaching kind of consultant, and he talks about how to help kids learn. Yeah, and he does some wonderful workshops with kids, and he uses the phrase "protect our children through education." So we're actually making a space where a child can feel that they can ask. They can say, "Look, sir, I don't get it. Can we look at it? Can you help me to understand this better?" So often we can make assumptions, can't we? And I know that adults react to that. They just want to be heard, and they just want to be kind of like, "Can you not just get it the first time?" Of course, there's a time element to that, and so forth. But I think, in a learning environment, there's a reason it's a learning environment. And we've got, in some classes, there's 35 kids who will all have different learning needs. And yes, maybe the majority of them get what's being presented to them. And personally, I always felt like I was the last one to get the memo, and would very reluctantly put my hand up. And I just kind of wish I had put my hand up more, actually. I think that would have been more useful. And actually, as I got older, I started to feel that I could do that because I cared less about what other people thought. And then that was helpful. So I'd love kids to kind of get it earlier in life. Just get that sense of, actually, I deserve to learn this. There's a reason I'm here. It's not my fault if it's not going in this way. Help me to get it in.
So with my teacher hat on, I'd say pedagogy's got to change. And in other countries, we've now got this business of something called universal design for learning that's not really hit the UK particularly yet. We're starting to talk about it, starting to realise that you need to present information in a variety of different ways to support your learners. We have had this whole visual, kinesthetic, auditory, what kind of learner are you? And actually, the reality of it is we're all blends of these different kinds of learning.
Of course.
And the more exciting and interesting and enjoyable we make learning, the better chance probably learners have got of embedding that learning. Teachers tend to teach in their own learning style. So if if you're really good at reading stuff off a board and absorbing it that way, then odds are that's the way you're going to teach. And then when someone comes up to you and says, "Can you find a different way for me to do this?" you might come unstuck because you've not actually gone through that thought process of how you learn things in different ways. I'm a big advocate of multi-sensory teaching styles because they're universally appealing. I think most children really, and young people, like getting their hands on stuff and being able to learn in practical ways. And I think that helps build self-esteem too, because when you've actually built the model and you can see it, or you can take it home and show parents and say, "Look, this is what I've done," then you're building self-esteem for that learner as well. You don't get the same kind of level of self-esteem when you've got, I don't know, dyspraxia and you're producing cramped handwriting, and even though you've got fabulous ideas for a story, it doesn't necessarily go down on the page in the right way. But if maybe you'd produce that as a video or as a recording, maybe you would feel that lift in self-esteem. Maybe you would, because you presented it in a way that was appropriate to you. We need to get better at taking learning from students in the mode that they present it that suits them best. And I think there's a real opportunity at home at the moment for parents to nurture that, if there's an interest in doing something a certain way, then we'll crack on and do it that way. You want to do it as a cartoon strip, great, do that. And we, as parents, we're in this quite powerful position actually, where we've got permission to sort of do a bit of learning support with our children. And if we fancy doing something a bit more creative, I think we should. I think it's a really beneficial thing for children at home at the moment to be getting some different learning opportunities. And I also think parents breaking down this business of, this teaching business isn't rocket science. Actually, we can do it. It is possible, and have some fun with it.
There's a great book. I don't know if you've read it. There's a book by a lady called Lois Letchford, and the book's called Reversed, and it's about her son who, when he was in Australia in primary education or whatever the equivalent was, he was so severely dyslexic that the teachers there couldn't cope with teaching him. They couldn't get through, and they actually said to her that he was unteachable and was the worst child they'd come across in 20 years of teaching. And of course, as a parent, that's really hard to hear. And in her book, she talks about how she took on the mantle of home learning, and how the thing that got him going to learning was actually sparking interest and sparking enthusiasm. And it involved going to the multiple museums. He got really good at making, I would call it Meccano, if you remember that when we were kids. There was something similar that he was using in Australia, making big old models of things, working out how buildings came together and all that kind of stuff. And spoiler alert, at the end of the book, basically he got a degree in MSc or a master's at Oxford University. And so the point was, the fact was that he needed to learn in a different way, and he needed to be motivated in his learning. And when he started to kind of enjoy the process of learning, then he started to feel good about himself and learn more. When we're faced with you've got to do it this way, but you just can't get your head in that place, you're going to start to deny yourself any kind of belief in what your potential is. So that's a great success story of a guy that was really struggling with learning because the system couldn't work with him, and they found a way through by almost letting him define it. Actually, a lot of it was like, "What do you want to do today? Okay, what do you feel like doing?" And then gradually that kind of came online and started to learn about the Egyptians and all various things. There's a lovely bit in there where they talk about a story. I can't remember exactly what the learning point was, but the thing they made, there was a box, like a memory box of stuff, and in the box was a bottle of dirty water. They'd obviously picked it out of a stream or something like that, and some of them made some comment about it being elephant pee, and they built this big old story about this bottle of elephant pee, and it was a big learning moment. And it's that kind of thing. It's like being allowed to go, okay, I know you call it this, but I'm going to call it that, because then it sticks in my head and I can remember that, and I know what that elephant pee's all about. And that's the thing. It's like we all do learn in different ways. Personally, I would love to be the kind of guy that could just absorb whatever comes out of a teacher's mouth. I've sort of found out in later life that actually my best way of learning is sitting in front of a YouTube video and I'll just absorb it. I play guitar, and a lot of my guitar stuff has been learned looking at YouTube videos, and that works for me. It's interesting that actually that YouTube is so popular. Yes, because of silly videos of cats jumping at cucumbers, but equally, it's there's a lot of learning stuff that's being delivered on there, teaching stuff that's being taught by people who perhaps struggled to learn in traditional ways and have found ways to express their own way of learning, and people have bought into that. And I'm sure a lot of it will be neurodiverse in nature.
Absolutely, certainly will be. So let's wrap up this webinar, John, and just go through about what would you say your key points would be for a parent who has been listening or watching, for ways to advocate and help their child perhaps to be able to have those conversations with their teachers when they go back to school. What are your big suggestions, things that they could do?
Okay.
Tips and hints.
The big tip that I've been sharing recently is I use the concept of, your kid comes home from school and they say, I'm fed up with today, I'm just stupid, I'm not getting it. And so often as parents, we don't want to hear that, and we might be tempted to go, don't say that, you're not stupid, you're a really clever child, how can you say you're stupid? And I think that's really common, but the reality is what you've really said is, don't say you're stupid. You've kind of like, you've validated the fact they feel stupid because you've just told them that what they said is wrong. And I think what we need to be able to do, if we want to boost the self-esteem of our kids, we need to take a second to listen. And it might hurt, it might be really difficult to hear that. And again, teachers will hear this as well. Now, I can't do this, miss, I'm just stupid. Actually, what's that about? Why are you saying that about yourself? What's leading you to think that? Well, I'm just not getting it. Okay, what can we do? What can we do differently that might help? It's giving our kids an opportunity to articulate what they're feeling about what's going on. And I think we start to empower them when we start to listen. We stop being the parent kind of ego thing where we're trying to make them think like us. And we say, actually, by listening, I respect you. I respect what you have to say. I respect how you're feeling, and I want to help you. How can I do that? And then when kids start to get the message that actually sir or mum or dad isn't trying to have a go, they're actually listening and want to help, then that starts to maybe unlock something, and maybe somehow there's a better relationship. Somehow that child can start to be more courageous about asking for what they need to help them with the learning.
I'm going to distill that to one word: curious. Be curious.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't focus on behavior. Be curious about what's behind it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great tip, John. Really good, and something that absolutely everybody can take away from this without a doubt. Okay, I'm just going to take us to the last slide on here. We didn't talk about heart, and we've kind of managed lots of questions as we've gone along through this webinar. So I'm going to just take us to the last slide now and just invite you, John, to talk about anything that you might have going on with events, and anything that you want to share with us before we get to the end of this brilliant session we've had.
Thank you. Well, there's a couple of things. I'd certainly, for any listeners, I'd like to just let you know that there is the Studying with Dyslexia blog, which focuses on emotional well-being, assistive technology, and education. The aim of the articles is to provide inspiration and information that can help you as you support a child who's studying. So please do Google that. You should be able to find it. But it's www.studyingwithdyslexiablog.co.uk. So go there. Now, if there's parents listening, one of the things that I'm working on is expanding the self-esteem kind of concept. It's not expand the concept, but the message I'm trying to put out there. And I'm speaking at the dyslexia show that got postponed from March, just before the lockdown. It's going to happen again in September, and I'm talking about tips for helping with self-esteem. So I'd encourage you to go to the Dyslexia Show website. You could just Google that. I'm sure you'll find it. And then the third thing is, if you are a parent and you want to get in touch with me, or if you want to kind of get deeper into the parenting stuff that I do, then I'd encourage you to go to parentingdyslexia.co.uk/welcome. And if you subscribe there and just check the parent box in the form, then I have a self-esteem online learning course that I'm writing at the moment, and we'll be making that available to the parenting dyslexia community. I'm aiming for September, October time. So if that's of interest, or if you want to help me shape that course, then I'd love to have your thoughts on it. So just get in touch.
Thank you, John. That's really great, and that's I know it's an invitation from the heart, because that's the kind of guy you are. You would genuinely like to work with people, and you encourage collaboration. So thank you so much, and thank you for collaborating with us today in this Succeed with Dyslexia webinar. This is part of a series of webinars that are going to be available online. We're going to make them into podcasts as well, so people can listen and enjoy them. We have some really exciting guests lined up to be able to share their knowledge with us. And I know that within a week or so, we're going to be talking to Kim Brown from the British Dyslexia Helpline, and she's going to be sharing the kind of questions that are asked when the phone gets picked up at the end of the Dyslexia Helpline. So that's going to make a couple of really interesting webinars as well. So also going around the world, I know that I've got people who I'm going to be chatting to from Australia, New Zealand, Ireland. It's a really nice project, but the aim of it is to try and put back some support into the community and share some knowledge and talk to people who are really very knowledgeable in their field, and then share that with you. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I'm sorry about the glitch at the start, but I think we've ended on a really great high. It's been a great session. Thank you, John, indeed.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you everyone who's listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.